it's great to welcome you once again to At the Table, hosted by Arena Church. This is episode 14. The heart of it is to be a resource that blesses people and churches and leaders, not just in Arena Church, but also outside of Arena Church. And I'd encourage you to listen or watch previous podcasts. We've addressed a number of discussions in that time. But I want to drive straight into it, if I may, because if you don't know who I've got before me, forgive his big muscles.
I've covered them up, Kristian.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You've got your guns out, I see.
Pistols. I don't know whether they're guns, but anyway. I've got genuinely our dear friend Mark Holdcroft. Mark and Liz lead a great church over in the Potteries areas. We've been friends now for 7-8 years, and he's not a guest. I feel he's part of our church family here at Arena Church. But what I wanted to do particularly today was look at the subject of health, and I'll explain what we mean by that in a moment. And why I've particularly asked you, Mark, to come. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, but welcome.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to do this.
Yeah.
This is a second home for me, so I'm no stranger to this place. Love your ministry, and I love this subject as well. So health is something that's very important to me.
So before we drive in, for those who don't know you, just tell us a little bit about early life, becoming a Christian. Don't all switch off. He was a police officer, a little bit about that. And then, of course...
Only the criminals will switch off at that.
So, just tell us a bit about where you grew up, early life,
Yeah, so I grew up in a place called Biddulph. It's somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, just outside of Stoke-on-Trent. And I wasn't a Christian. My family had some Christian background, but actually it was my brother that became a Christian first. He was born with a hole in his heart. My nan, who passed away last year, she was part of the church, brought the need to the church. He became a Christian later on in life as a result of God really helping him, saving him through that process. And he kept inviting me to church. So when I was a teenager, my brother would invite me regularly to come to church with him to the youth group, and I would always refuse until he got sick of asking me. And then just when I was about 15, just started to question my whole life, future. It's that little time of teenage life where you start to question. And I didn't feel good about where I was, and I just knew there was something more. And so I asked him if I could come to church with him, and he was shocked. But I went along, and really from that day forward, I just knew this is that God was real. This is where my life is going. That whatever I do, I want to do it for God. It was a very significant change. Now, it doesn't mean that I just carried on an upward journey. There were ups and downs, especially as a teenager. But it was a very significant moment when I was 15.
Wow. You then go from finding faith. Your teenage year, did you always want to be a police officer? Because you entered the police force.
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I was initially, I didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I initially was a fitness instructor. I did sports science when I went to university. Okay. Came out into that.
Hence
but then,
why the,
I'll let you know.
Just leave it alone.
But I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something that had purpose. Yeah. And so I thought I'd just apply I think I applied for the fire brigade and the police, and just thought I'll leave it to God where I get in. And God just opened the doors. At the time, I think there was 12 places going, and there was 2,000 applicants for the particular job I went for. And it's not because I'm highly skilled, it's because God opened the door for me that I became a police officer.
Amazing.
And I didn't know that God had put me there.
Yeah.
So I'd prayed about each stage, and I knew that was a place that God wanted me to be. So I was in the police then for 7.5, 8 years.
Wow. It's a great place when you know you're in the bullseye of God's will. It's just trusting him and letting him open doors and walking through them. And
It is. And that particular place was also a great place. I'm now a pastor, and I've done Bible college.
Yeah.
But actually, 7.5, 8 years in the police force as a Christian was a great training to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Really great training, dealing with people in the most difficult of situations, not always being the most popular person on the block, but having to make decisions anyway, and trying to uphold your integrity in a place of great compromise, and you know, people provoking you was just a great place to learn to be a follower of Jesus.
I mean, we're right in, I don't want to take us there, but just while we're talking about that and your journey, we have many people who are Christ followers who are in our services, who are police officers, and of course there's many who aren't. But if there's ever been a time when we need to pray for our policing, I know it's ridiculed and there's lots of things that happen, but if we're not careful, we say that it's all corrupt, it's all wrong, and actually what we need to do is pray for them and
totally
and support
my
them.
experience was that, you know, you do come across the old bad egg, but most of them that were there because they believed in the job they were doing.
Amazing. But we need to pray. So anybody listening to me, please, if we can just make sure that we do that and live different and let's stand out. So you're now a police officer. I know you became, because how we got to know you was just arrived back, yourself and Liz, of being missionaries to Slovakia. Before we get there, you've obviously married to Liz. Just tell us a little bit about her and your children, just before we get to the missionary part.
Yeah, so I've got one wife, 2 kids. And a dog.
I'm glad you've only got one wife.
I thought that was the right way around to do things. So yeah, Liz is, I mean, we've been married now, I mean, we started dating 28 years ago, I think.
Wow.
And I had to wait till she finished uni, so we've been married for 20 something years. And she really is somebody that inspires me to go after God more. And I think, and I do her, and I think if you're in a relationship where you're really, you've got different skills, she's the prayer, the intercessor, she's also the worshipper. She's got a great voice. I really haven't. But I'm then the studier. I love to go deeper into the word, and we just encourage each other in our different areas. And so we've done that throughout our life. We challenged each other to go further in God. And so that's been wonderful. And it was somewhere along that journey, I was in the police force when I got married, that I knew I wasn't going to finish my time in the police.
Okay.
I believe I was in there for a season, thoroughly, I won't say thoroughly enjoyed all the time, but certainly knew it was a purpose-filled career. But I knew it wasn't where I was going to end. I knew God had got something else for us. And we were called eventually to go to Slovakia. So we put down our jobs, our homes, our family, and we'd got a young daughter at the time, and we moved over to Slovakia, spent 10 years as missionaries in Slovakia.
So gave everything up?
Yeah.
Careers?
We did. In fact, I think the truth is, Kristian, we had a wrong mentality, and we actually gave more up than God asked us to. You know, we know the scripture about obedience being over sacrifice, and the context of that is with Saul. But actually, sometimes we sacrifice with the wrong mentality. We'll come on to some of this a little bit later. But we did give up things that we shouldn't have given up, such as I gave up some of my regular disciplines and habits to focus completely on the ministry. But actually, these regular disciplines and habits were the things that were keeping me healthy to do the ministry. So it was a case of sacrifice, but sometimes it is a case that God requires obedience over sacrifice. And
well, you gave up your careers, young family, relatively young marriage, going to a language I don't think any of you have got in your background, Slovakian blood. You're having to learn a language. I know it's in Europe, but it's still different.
I'm not a linguist.
No.
At all. I've got no. I failed German. Well, I didn't even fail German. I didn't take German. No. I was given an exception at that time at school. You had to take the language as part of your GCSEs. I was that bad. They allowed me to take both history and geography instead.
Right.
Because I just couldn't grasp that languages worked differently.
Wow.
And so to go to another country and to learn a language it just shows that sometimes God's just got to change your mindset. He's got to change your way of thinking. And he did that in
Just
us.
really quickly, was that daunting? The thought of going out to a new country?
Massively.
Yeah, yeah.
I think for us personally,
But
it
you
wasn't.
still did it?
For me, if it was just me and Liz, it was an adventure. But we were also taking out a 6-month-old daughter. My mother was worried. She didn't know what that part of Europe was our daughter going to be trafficked. Yeah. You know, we had a lot of opposition to actually going from people that loved us, not because they didn't want the best for us, the opposite. And we were determined that this was God's will. We needed to do it.
Very good.
But because you've got those voices speaking negatively, it did bring a certain fear. Have we got this right?
Yeah.
How we're going to survive? We're going from good wages to 10% of what we're going to earn. How we're going to live on that? And some of those fears weren't unfounded.
No.
So we had to deal with, when things did start to unravel, as we'll come on to, we had to deal with a lot of those realised fears. We often say that fear is something that's not true or worries, things that aren't going to happen. But actually some of the things did happen.
Yeah.
Some bad things did happen.
Yeah.
And we had to then deal with that and still know that God's a loving God who's led us to a place that's uncomfortable and deal with the confusion and the confused state you find yourself in.
So let me just drive into it now, because I'm really glad we've covered those bases, so you've got a bit of a broad understanding for those who are watching, listening, of who Mark Holdcroft is and what's brought you to this point. So you're out in Slovakia. We're specifically talking about health.
Yes.
People go to, and it's a massive subject at the moment. Everybody's talking about it in different ways. Financial health, marriage health, personal health, mind health, physical health, all those kinds of things. But I just want to talk about health, principally into mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, first of all, before we go to some of the challenges, have you always committed to being healthy in those three areas?
Yes. Yes, certainly. So as a teenager, I really started to get into exercise, keeping myself healthy, would daily exercise. Not so much emotional health. I didn't even consider that to be a thing, really.
No.
So
that's because we concentrate more on the physical, don't we? But
yes.
I'm glad you've said that.
So I didn't really do anything of any particular spiritual health. Yes, I understood from teaching that to develop that deeper relationship with God. But actually emotional health, no, I wouldn't say I did anything disciplined to make sure I kept myself emotionally healthy. I dealt with a lot of things. In the police force, I saw a lot of things that were upsetting, and I'd got used to just shaking things off. You'd come home from a child dying, and you'd come home, you'd feel a bit down and sad, and then you'd get used to shaking things off. And
was it shaking off, or was it repressing?
I think it was probably repressing. I think it was probably repressing. I think that's something that I learnt later on. And I don't think it was taught so much. And I'm not blaming anybody, because we're always going to admit things.
Completely.
But I don't think it was taught about the importance of keeping yourself healthy in all the different areas.
I agree.
Even physically, it wasn't particularly. It was all about the spiritual health when you were in church. Maybe in other areas you'd learn about the physical health. But I think keeping all of those areas in balance is something that I've learned is so important.
So, you hit a crisis.
Yeah.
You're in Slovakia.
Yeah.
As I've heard this story, it's very powerful actually. Tell us about it. What led up to it?
Yeah.
What happened?
So we'd had an emotional time.
Just before I go there, some people, and I really mean this, you may have had a crisis of health. A crisis. Some people may not have even known about it. I really want you to listen carefully to what Mark has to say, because I really believe it can be a help to you. So please.
Yeah. So the leading up to going to Slovakia had been very emotionally challenging. I mentioned about the people we were leaving behind.
Yeah.
I can remember the day we left, we had family and friends around my brother's house, and it was like being at your own funeral. It was, do you know, people make just polite jokes, they're trying to, but there's a overall powerful sadness that was hanging over the day. And so the whole year had been building up to this point, and we were giving the jobs up. There was a lot of things we were having to trust God for in an area we'd never trusted him before. We'd always had secure jobs, and all of a sudden we were going out into this realm where actually we would have to live by faith. We were trusting other people for the income. So we went out to Slovakia with this heaviness, but trusting God that he'd sent us there. We were certain this was the calling. We were certain about where we were going. And just trusting that if he sent us, he's going to look after us. But not realising that actually we were going to go through some dark valleys on the way. And so in the first year, we'd struggled with certain things. So for me personally, I struggled with the language. It was taking me longer than Liz. Liz was, she's a musician, so she picks up little nuances in sound and speech where I don't. Everything's just the same to me.
Sure.
So being able to learn and to speak proficiently the language was difficult. And we'd had to take anything we wanted to do, doesn't matter how simple it was, I had to take a translator with me. Right. And it felt like you went from being an adult to all of a sudden being a child again. And I didn't realise how disempowering that was. I was no longer the breadwinner, the earner. I was relying on support from others. And actually, because we'd been a little naive and we'd not considered so many things, we'd done it so quickly with so much faith and a lot of naivety that we hadn't planned properly. We didn't know how volatile money markets were. So the money we'd raised, we decided we were going to live on the average wage of a Slovak so that we could really live at their standards, minister from an equal footing.
Yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we didn't realise is it's far more expensive for a foreigner to live in a country often than it is for a native. Right. So, and straight away with ministry expenses and the fact we're ministering, it all of a sudden was more expensive. Secondly, we didn't realise that the value of the pound against the Slovak currency, which was krona at that time, would drop by half. Right. So within, and Slovak wage is low. It was a lot lower than a British wage. But all of a sudden we found ourselves not just living on an average Slovak wage with more expenses, but actually living on half an average Slovak wage. And we found ourselves in a desperate state. But because we trusted with God, and there was ego involved.
So you had language issues, you have financial challenges. They can bring major, all this emotional stuff that's happening.
It was very disempowering, and the financial. So we got to the point at one point where there was nothing in the cupboards, and I literally mean nothing. There wasn't even a bag of rice. There was nothing in the cupboards to eat. We just got enough to feed Jessica, and we decided we're just going to have to fast till the next, I think it was 3 weeks till the next wage. And so we that's what we did. We fasted, and it wasn't a spiritual fast. We hadn't got anything to eat, but because we'd said we're going, and we felt it would have been dishonouring of God to tell our supporters the situation. We'd got these warped ideas of what God wanted for us.
Yeah, good.
And so we just thought we've got to just plough through this, and it was tough. And I think all of that really started to. I started to. Who am I? I'm not looking after my family. I'm not looking after. And also the pressure. I was now a missionary, and I didn't really know what that meant. And I suddenly felt I needed to live up to a spiritual level that I knew inside I wasn't at that level. I felt an imposter in the role that I was playing. And it just led to a point where about a year in, I was asked to preach at a large youth conference. And there was several hundred young people there. the sermon went great. It just felt so good. And yet I stepped off the stage and I felt, this is what I've been dreaming of. This is speaking to these young people, inspiring. This is what. But I stepped off that stage, and as I stepped off the stage, all of a sudden everything came crashing down.
Right.
And there's actually a photograph of me from the back of it. It was a big theatre. At the back of the theatre, and it looks like I'm sitting down with my head on the chair in front, and it looks so serene. It looks like I'm praying, but it was actually the start of what I realised now. I didn't know what was happening to me at that time, but was a complete nervous breakdown.
You're unhealthy.
Yeah, I was unhealthy. And not only that, one thing I hadn't mentioned is because I'd gone from a very structured... I mean, the place isn't structured, but I knew what time I started work, and I knew what time I'd finish. When I got home, that was my time to be with the family or be at church, serve. I suddenly went into a situation where I'd got all this time to minister, and so I was using all that time. I hadn't got a structured routine, so I was trying to fill it as much as possible with ministry, and I wasn't actually taking any time to be with Liz, to do the things. And I don't know how many hours I was working, but it would have been a lot of hours from early in the morning to late at night. Just sacrificing everything. I stopped exercising, which was very much a part of what I did. Mm-hmm. But I stopped doing that to because I thought, that's for me. That's not important. I think the important bit's the ministry, and I need to be doing this. I'm a missionary. What am I doing? And I think all these warped mindsets just meant that I got to this point where everything just collapsed, and within a very, very short space of time, I was completely and utterly paralysed for big chunks of the day by a overwhelming depression, by an anxiety, by a sense of there was physical things that started to happen. This physical changes that take place. Hormone levels go into overdrive, and I was struggling to get up in the morning. I was struggling to sleep. I was struggling to do anything. I was, but at the same time, I didn't think I could tell anybody back home because I had gone out. I was a missionary. I was supposed to be a man of God.
God's man of power for the hour.
And God would give me grace, so I could still serve.
Yeah.
I can remember once I was in the middle of when it was getting really, really tough, and the pastor of the church where I was serving before we went out to church plant from that church, but the pastor I was serving and supporting, his wife suddenly went into labour, and so he rang me up on the Saturday night, Sunday morning to ask if I would preach. And at this point, I was in the middle of it, me and Liz were trying to keep our lives together, but I was just in an absolute mess that we hadn't told anybody about at this time. And I got I was in a mess, got up, preached. Nobody would have thought a thing. Came back home, and I was a mess. Just an absolute mess. So I had the grace to do things. We had a ministry serving the homeless. Yeah. I could serve the home. In fact, actually, believe it or not, that gave me a little bit of relief. Serving people that actually had proper problems gave me a little bit of light relief during the week.
But it can be like many of our lives that we can hide things, we can masquerade, we put on masks. Sometimes we don't need to, because I've just picked up, you've got an unrealistic expectation of yourself. Yeah. You're filling then yourself with working too hard, taking things away from your life that fill up your bucket. Yes. Which all adds to, and I think there's a lot of people who'll be listening or watching, Mark, who this is their life. Yeah. I don't want to cause people to, start, taking them somewhere, but there will be. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it on the knife edge, on the cliff edge, because what I want to do in the next part that we're together, I want to talk about, we found out where you're at. Yeah. What did you now do? Because you're not that man. That man that you've just described is unrecognisable to me. But we'll talk into the next episode around some of the things that you did, very practically, very earthy, that will be helpful for people. So what I would like to say, listen, it's been great to have you with us for episode 14. You need to check into episode 15 that will quickly follow. You're going to hear again from Pastor Mark Holdcroft over there in Livestream Church, Biddulph. Check it out. Check his website out. And particularly if you really wanted to know, how can I get healthy? It may not be Mark's story in the fullness of it, but there's elements, what he's just said there, that would be my life. You have to take stock. You have to take a real measurement of your own life. And we want to be healthy in all aspects. And we're going to discuss that in the next episode. So thanks for being with us today. God bless you. If we can help you in any way, serve you in any way, please don't hesitate to contact us. And we can go from there. God bless you.